envision Rome not as weathered ruins beneath the gaze of tourists, but as it once towered over the world, vast, magnificent, and alive with unending motion. A city where emperors commanded the course of history, where the thunder of legions echoed across continents, and the axis of the known world turned beneath the weight of their power. Picture Rome at the height of its glory, marble temples blazing in the Mediterranean sun, legions marching in perfect formation, markets overflowing with silks, spices, and treasures from lands so distant most Romans could only imagine them. Roads stretched like veins across continents, binding the empire from the misty forests of Britannia to the golden sands of Arabia. In the 1st century AD, Rome seemed untouchable. Under emperors like Augustus, Vespasian, and Trajan, it reached its greatest size, nearly 5 million square kilometers, home to more than 60 million people. 1 in every 4 humans on Earth lived under its laws. The Pax Romana promised 2 centuries of relative peace. Aqueducts carried clean water to dry land. A shared currency, common laws, and a single language united millions. On the surface, it was a machine of perfect order. But the surface can lie. Behind the marble and majesty, cracks were already forming. The empire had grown too large. Every new province demanded more soldiers, more administrators, more resources. Its economy ran on vast estates powered by slave labor. But when expansion stopped, so did the flow of new slaves, and the system began to falter. Rome had been built on endless war. When the conquest ended, the machine turned inward on itself. Taxes rose. Poverty deepened year after year. The cost of running the empire exceeded what it could collect. By the 2nd century, Rome faced a famine, not of food, but of money, the oxygen of its economy. Trade routes, once bringing goods from India, Africa, and deep Europe, began to wither. Piracy, wars, and instability made transport dangerous and prices soar. Without the tribute of conquered lands, the empire plunged into a fiscal crisis. To pay its armies and fund public works, the state began debasing its currency. Less gold, less silver, more copper, and more inflation. Prices skyrocketed. Confidence in money vanished. The tax burden crushed small farmers and artisans. Many abandoned their land, seeking protection. Thousands offered their labor to powerful landowners in exchange for shelter from tax collectors, soldiers, and bandits. This was the seed of a new order, a system of direct dependence that would one day become feudalism. It began here, in the ruins of a state that could no longer guarantee security, justice, or survival. While the economy collapsed quietly, politics descended into chaos. Starting in 235 AD, Rome entered what historians call the military anarchy. In less than 50 years, over 20 emperors took power. Most were murdered, overthrown, or killed in battle. Generals proclaimed themselves emperors. Civil wars replaced foreign campaigns. Roman provinces turned against each other. The empire's unity began to unravel from within. With the legions consumed by infighting, the borders lay exposed. Germanic tribes crossed the Rhine. Sarmatians invaded Pannonia. Cities were left unprotected. Even Roman soldiers looted towns as if they were enemy territory. The historian Zosimus wrote that Rome seemed to devour itself. Power was no longer a symbol of order. It was a prize in a never-ending war. In 285, Emperor Diocletian tried to save the empire with a drastic decision to split it in two. The Tetrarchy placed 2 senior emperors and 2 juniors over separate halves of Rome. The East became wealthier and more secure. The West, with its shifting capitals, weak harvests, and constant invasions, slipped deeper into crisis. And It was in the weakened West that the so-called barbarians found their opening dot. To Romans, barbarian was a convenient label for anyone outside their world, anyone who spoke strange languages or ignored Roman customs. In truth, they were not a single people, but many, the Goths. Bandaruso Francusu Saxonzu Hans, each with their own leaders, cultures, and ambitions. Many served Rome for decades as allies and soldiers. Some rose to high rank, governed provinces, even married into Roman aristocracy. But they were never seen as equals. Promises of land and food were broken. Corruption and prejudice turned allies into enemies. In 378 AD, the tension exploded at the Battle of Adrianople. The Visigoths, mistreated while seeking asylum, rose in rebellion. Emperor Valens marched to confront them, confident but unprepared. His army was destroyed. Valens was killed. It was more than a defeat. It was a signal. The barbarians were no longer just background players. They were now a central force in Rome's story. And then came a name that would haunt the empire, Attila, emerging from the steppes of Central Asia. The Huns were fast, fierce, and unpredictable. Under Attila's leadership, they became a superpower. He negotiated when it suited him and burned cities when it didn't. His invasions of the Balkans and threats to Constantinople shook the empire. In 451 AD, Attila turned west, marching into Gaul. City after city fell. Panic spread. But in a desperate alliance, Roman forces under Flavius Aetius fought alongside the Visigoths at the Battle of the Catalonian Plains. Attila was stopped. Barely. The following year, he invaded Italy itself. Cities like Aquilare were obliterated. Rome seemed doomed until Pope Leo I met Attila in person. No one knows what was said, but Attila turned back. 2 years later, he was dead, and his empire crumbled. But the damage was done. Rome had survived physically, but the myth of its invincibility was shattered. That myth had already been wounded in 410 AD when the Visigoth king, Alaric, once a Roman ally, marched on the city. For 3 days, his forces looted Rome. There was no mass slaughter, but the shock was immense. Saint Jerome wrote in despair, "The world is collapsing." 45 years later, the Vandals under Genseric returned, this time by sea. They plundered Rome for 2 weeks, taking gold, silver, sacred relics, and high-ranking hostages. The city was stripped bare. Even the word Vandal would forever mean mindless destruction. By 475 AD, the Western Empire was a shadow. A boy named Romulus Augustulus was placed on the throne by his father, the general Orestes. The following year, Odoacer, leader of barbarian troops, demanded land for his men. Orestes refused. Odoacer marched on Ravenna, deposed Romulus without a fight, and sent the imperial regalia to Constantinople. The Western Roman Empire was no more. It ended not with a great final battle, but with a quiet surrender, dismantled by decades of arrogance, neglect, and decay. Yet Rome did not vanish. Its laws, language, architecture, and faith lived on. The Eastern Empire, Byzantium, would endure for nearly 1,000 years. In the West, new kingdoms rose, speaking new languages, but building on Rome's foundations. Cathedrals rose with columns from pagan temples. Kings wore Roman titles. Latin evolved into the Romance languages. Rome still whispered in every stone, every word, every dream of empire. If this story gave you a new perspective on how empires fall and how their echoes live on, then ask yourself, when did Rome truly end? Was it the sack of the city? The death of an emperor? Or was it the slow, unseen moment when the cracks first began to spread?